Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. On the eve of her entry into the Crown Estate, Vivian Zhang came to me clutching 3 feet of white silk. She claimed she wished to see me off on my final journey. She told me she had suffered through a long wait, but the day had finally arrived. Yet, had I not been waiting as well? I feigned terror on the surface, but the moment I raised my hand, my hairpin pierced straight through her throat. As I watched Lord Julian charge in with his sword drawn, I gently stroked my own face, a face that mirrored Vivian's exactly, and asked with calm indifference, "Do you desire the future promised by the Crown Estate, or do you seek vengeance for your beloved daughter? Make your choice." He was, at his core, a cowardly and mediocre man, so he ultimately chose his career. His cherished daughter had died a gruesome death, yet he was willing to abandon that deep-seated grudge. Lady Madeline wept until her eyes bled, gritting her teeth as she spat out venomous words. "The palace is a treacherous place. Without a maternal family to back you, I will wait for the day your blood stains its walls." But she forgot that I am not only ruthless, but also a master of deceptive grace, skilled enough to manipulate the hearts of others. I wanted both the power of the Crown Estate and their very lives. The night before Vivian was set to enter the Crown Estate, she stepped into my courtyard. She dragged the train of her pearl-encrusted gown, walking leisurely toward me with a smug air, as if she were indeed sending me to my death. The jade hairpins adorning her head trembled under the lantern light, shining so brightly they stung my eyes. I lowered my lashes, and she mistook it for resignation to my fate. She gestured to the silver tray behind her, where a cup of poisoned wine, a dagger, and 3 feet of white silk were arranged, and spoke slowly. "Grandmother has been sent away, and father has given his tacit approval. Today is the day you die." She chuckled softly, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tomorrow I will enter the Crown Estate. As sisters, you should contribute a portion to my dowry. But I know you are destitute, with nothing to offer but your cheap life. So, out of kindness, I have come to take it myself." Her fingers, white as scallions, grazed the strip of silk. "Use this. It is quiet and clean, so it will not soil my clothes. It can also be tightened and loosened, allowing me to torture you between life and death." I leisurely stroked the hairpin in my hair, slowly stood up, and approached her step by step. "But I also have a grand gift I wish to present to you." Vivian remained confident that victory was hers, her eyes filled only with contempt and insult. She laughed aloud. "A grand gift? Do you have any idea how long I have suffered waiting for this day? Even a mountain of gold and silver could not stop me." Before she could finish her sentence, the hairpin in my hand had already pierced straight through her throat. Fresh blood spurted from her neck. She tremblingly raised her hands to cover the wound, but she could do nothing to stop the flow. The servants holding the poisoned wine, the dagger, and the white silk immediately panicked. They fled the room in disarray, leaving only Vivian kneeling on the floor, her eyes staring at me with intense hatred. I bent down and smiled calmly. "Are you satisfied with this grand gift? You say you suffered while waiting, but who has not? I have been waiting for 10 years. She died with her eyes wide open, her arrogant gaze frozen in malice. Her long dress, now dyed red, spread across the cold stone floor, glowing like a magnificent hibiscus flower just coming into bloom. I looked down into those eyes and raised an eyebrow. "Do not stare at me like that. The glory of the Crown Estate, I will enjoy it in your place." I neatly tucked the blood-stained hairpin back into place. I sat upright in the grand armchair, silently wondering who would be next. Sure enough, the person who arrived was my father, the man who loved his daughter more than life itself. He rushed in with a sword, radiating murderous intent, but upon seeing Vivian's bloodied corpse, he could barely stand. The tip of his sword pointed straight at my throat. His eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and roared, "Elena Jiang, I have never mistreated you. Why did you kill Vivian and gouge out my heart like this?" He hissed, his voice full of contempt. "You are exactly like your wretched mother, base to the very bone. Today I will kill you to restore the family honor." The sword swung straight toward my vital point. I merely tilted my head, raised my brow slightly, and used a face that resembled Vivian's to the nines, to curve my lips into a soft smile. I asked calmly, "Lord Julian, do you want the future promised by the Crown Estate, or do you want to avenge your beloved daughter? Make your choice." He froze. My smile deepened, my gaze locking onto his trembling pupils. How could the death of 2 daughters in one night not leak out to the public? The eldest daughter dying before entering the Crown Estate is a bad omen. The second daughter killing her own sister is a sign of a ruined family reputation. If this gets out, the marriage of your heir, your future official career, and the fate of the Zhang family will likely all be in jeopardy. He was a man who had once harmed his wife for the sake of his career, ungrateful to the bitter end. Even though he loved Vivian, he ultimately coveted his future more. The sword, which had been slashing toward my throat, suddenly halted an inch away and fell to the ground with a clang. For the sake of his career, he had once again severed his own familial bonds. Vivian's corpse was quietly dragged out of my courtyard. I draped myself in the red cloak she had worn when she arrived, stepping firmly to seize the glory that originally belonged to her. From this moment on, her marriage, her future, and even her identity and name belonged to me. I had just washed the scent of blood from my hands when my stepmother, Lady Madeline, rushed in like a madwoman. The noble daughter of the head of the Imperial Academy had spent her life with her head held high and her back straight as a sword. Even when stealing another woman's husband or taking a life, she acted as if she were bestowing a favor. Yet now, her hair was disheveled, her dress was in disarray, and her tears had smeared her makeup into miserable streaks. She pointed a trembling finger straight at me. "You are indeed vicious. You pretended to be gentle and harmless for years. I truly underestimated you." She gritted her teeth. "You harmed my Vivian. You deserve to die." She hated me enough to want to rush forward, tear me apart, and drink my blood, but she was held back tightly by the servants, unable to move a single step. She cursed Lord Julian for being blind and protecting me too much. How foolish. It was only because father still needed the power of the Sue family that he sent his trusted aides to preserve her life. He was a master of calculating benefits. He understood clearly that if I could kill Vivian and still escape unscathed, having a little of Lady Madeline's blood on my hands would be nothing out of the ordinary. Seeing her enemy right before her eyes but being unable to touch or kill me, even her curses became laughable. Her appearance, weeping tears of blood and hatred, was identical to how I felt years ago when I hid in a water jar, watching with my own eyes as my mother had her throat slit by her henchmen. She was finally tasting the pain I felt that day. The only difference was that back then, I gritted my teeth and swallowed my hatred, waiting for the day of vengeance. But Lady Madeline wailed miserably, completely broken. She pointed straight at my face and cursed, "You will not die a peaceful death. You killed my child and gouged out my heart, the Sue family, and you cannot share the same sky." I indifferently lifted the jade bracelet that Vivian loved most, examined it under the candlelight for a moment, and then let go. The bracelet, prepared with such care by Lady Madeline for her daughter's coming-of-age ceremony, fell to the floor and shattered into pieces at my feet. It was just like the perfect life of high nobility she held so tightly in her hands, which had ultimately turned to sea foam within my calculations. Lady Madeline's eyes looked as if they were splitting from pain, as if I were flaying her flesh layer by layer. But it was not enough. I clapped my hands lightly and smiled calmly. "You killed my mother, so I killed your beloved daughter. A life for a life. It is fair," I continued, my voice calm but sharp. "But you are not my equal. I could endure for 8 years just waiting for today. As for you, from now on, you will not even have the chance to exact revenge with your own hands." She trembled with hatred. I watched with delight and spoke slowly. "You pretended to be generous and virtuous your whole life, yet you were helpless when you wanted to kill a mere illegitimate daughter. I pretended to be weak and useless for 8 years, yet I was able to kill my enemy with my own hands and got out your heart. That is my first victory. You killed my mother, taking away the person I loved most, but you only dared to plot in secret. I killed your beloved daughter, tearing out your heart and lungs, letting the whole world know. Yet I still retreated unscathed. That is my second victory. You used your sisters to pull your maternal family to your side, scheming for Vivian for years to secure her future in the crown estate. Yet now, I have taken it all without wasting a single breath. That is my third victory. Lady Madeline, you are not even worth one of my fingers, let alone being comparable to my mother, who saved lives and carried righteousness in her heart. Suffering blow after blow, and having her heart carved out by my soft words, she finally could not take it anymore. She broke free from the servant's grip and recklessly lunged at me. Thud! A hairpin pierced straight into her flesh, and a brilliant red plum blossom bloomed on her chest. The dagger in her hand was still gripped tight. She slowly looked down at the bright red blood gushing out, then looked up at me in disbelief. Finally, she gasped for air, her body going limp as she fell into the arms of an old servant. I trampled on her agony, a fate worse than death. I lightly shook the blood-stained hairpin in my hand and spoke in a gentle voice. Rest assured, I will not let you die. I hate you so much that I want you to live a very long time, so that every day you are sliced by the knife of losing your loved ones. Her breath was as weak as a thread. Hating me to the point of crying blood, she still tried to spit out venomous words. The palace gates are as deep as the sea. Princess Valerie Xiao has the mouth of a Buddha but the heart of a snake. Consort Serafina Zhao is cruel to the core. Without a maternal family to protect you, I will wait for the day your blood stains the palace walls, and you die without an intact corpse. My gaze drifted through the curling incense smoke and I raised an eyebrow with a smile. But she forgot that I am not only ruthless but also a master of deceptive grace, extremely skilled at manipulating the hearts of others. I want their lives, and I also want the future and glory of the crown estate. The noble daughter of the Imperial Academy's head was famous throughout the capital. Yet, Lady Madeline was originally a woman who stole another's husband, not hesitating to commit murder and arson. Before Lord Julian went to the capital, he already had a family. My mother was a physician in Chuangzhong. After giving birth to me, her body was frail, so she could not follow him to the capital for his examinations. The peach blossoms in the southeast corner of our courtyard bloomed 5 times, yet father still did not return. In the 6th year, people from the capital finally arrived. That night, the moon was curved like a blade, each beam slicing into the skin, painful enough to draw blood. Just past midnight, the door was pounded upon thunderously, making the walls of the house shake violently. Having practiced medicine for many years, my mother was always cautious. Just by hearing the footsteps, she knew the intruders were martial artists and that they had not come with good intentions. She just managed to stuff me into a water jar when the door was kicked open. The intruder's face was covered with a black cloth. With a mere wave of his hand, the men in black behind him pinned my mother face down on the ground. Before I could understand what was happening, her hair was yanked back, her chin lifted, and a blade slashed across her throat. Her body was thrown onto the floor as lightly as a broken puppet, blood gushing out in waves. She convulsed, her eyes wide open staring at me, her mouth ceaselessly mouthing the word, "Run." Then, carrying her resentment, she breathed her last. An old female servant looked down at the corpse and spoke with disdain. "If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for marrying the wrong man and blocking my lady's path to happiness." Then she ordered coldly, "No need to search for the child. Set fire to this house and burn it to the ground. Spare not even the chickens or dogs." Flames rose to the sky and just like that, my home turned to ash. Hiding in the water jar, I was saved by a villager who owed my mother a debt of gratitude and risked death to pull me out. The pharmacy was reduced to broken walls and shattered tiles, and my only relative had died without an intact corpse. I was only 6 years old that year. From then on, there was no one to protect or love me. I had to grow up in a single night. I dug up the dowry my mother had scrimped and saved to leave behind under the great tree, swearing that I would go to the capital to exact revenge. Everyone advised me to change my name, go into hiding, and live a peaceful life. My tears fell onto the red-painted money jar, each drop spreading like a stain of blood. I smiled bitterly and replied, "How can I live a good life when I am soaked in a sea of hatred? My life was given by my mother. If I die to avenge her, I am willing." Only after entering the capital did I learn that father had married the noble daughter of the head of the Imperial Academy, and even their eldest daughter was already 4 years old. At that time, I was no match for them. From then on, I understood clearly that in this life, I had to become a hypocrite who was ruthless at heart. For the sake of revenge, and to ensure no one could trample on me, every step had to be calculated to the very end. When I was 7, I disguised myself as a bruised and battered little beggar, and fainted right under the wheels of the Duchess's carriage. My face, which looked exactly like Vivian's, terrified her. I had investigated beforehand and knew the Duchess was at odds with Vivian's grandmother. She would certainly not miss such a good opportunity to trample her rival. Sure enough, she grabbed me and stormed straight to the Zhang residence. She scolded my father, saying he was unworthy of being a scholar, accusing him of sleeping around and then leaving, abandoning his romantic debts. She called him base to the extreme. Every word was like a knife stabbing straight into the hearts of Lord Julian and Lady Madeline. Grandmother was bedridden at the time, deliriously seeking immortality. I bribed a fake monk to deceive her, telling her that as long as she had the Phoenix girl, she would live to be 100 years old. That day, as soon as she saw the phoenix-shaped birthmark on my forehead, she remembered the master's prophecy. She was overjoyed and, not hesitating to turn against father, insisted on keeping me in the residence. Lady Madeline dared not bear the reputation of being unfilial, nor could she shoulder the label of being a jealous and cruel woman, so she had to grit her teeth and let me cross that threshold. However, I was turned into the result of a one-night fling when father was entertaining guests. Although I was clearly 2 years older than Vivian, I was categorized as the second illegitimate daughter of the Jiang family. The marital affection between Lady Madeline and Lord Julian, which had been praised by the entire capital, became a laughingstock because of me. Lady Madeline appeared virtuous and dignified on the surface, but behind my back, she hated me to the bone. She assigned a teaching nanny to torture me every day. I ate leftovers and dregs, and wore coarse rags. She claimed she wanted me to learn poetry and etiquette, but in reality, she only threw a few cheap storybooks at me to read all day. I was beaten if I stood and beaten if I sat. Behind my back, she would complain to grandmother and father that I refused to learn and was extremely stubborn. My stepmother pretended to speak up for me, but every word was like pouring oil on the fire. She implicitly reminded him of my lowly bloodline, exactly like my peasant mother, causing the last shred of father's guilt to vanish completely. Eventually, because I was not proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting like Vivian, father felt ashamed. He forced me to help in the servants' quarters and forbade me from going out to avoid embarrassing the Jiang family. He scolded me. Do not be like your mother, hiding in the countryside all her life with a narrow vision. She nearly ruined my entire life. The nanny was given tacit permission, so her whip became more frequent. I acted timid, fearful, obedient, and submissive, all while silently carving each of their faces into my heart. It was not until grandmother's birthday banquet a year later that I pretended to slip and fall into the water, dragging the nanny down with me into the lake. Just the day before, I had dosed her with laxatives, so her limbs were weak. Now, as I held her tight underwater, she could not struggle free. She flailed and cried for help until she was exhausted, but I kept her head submerged. I bent down, picked up a rock, and smashed it repeatedly and violently into her lower abdomen. She was racked with pain, choking on water until she suffocated. Finally, she went limp, dying as fully as a rotting fish. When the servants plunged into the lake, eager to fish my body out, I instead ran frantically towards my stepmother. I burst into tears, and then, in my ill-fitting, baggy clothes, I suddenly fainted right in front of all the guests in the courtyard. I shattered the reputation of virtue that Lady Madeline had worked so hard to build right then and there. That day, a noble from the capital had come to the residence, intending to help her request a title. But unexpectedly, the revelation that she treated her stepdaughter harshly and even endangered her life came to light. Her good name could not withstand it, and the opportunity slipped away. Before she could play any more tricks, I nearly died from eating incompatible foods, and the cakes and meals had all been arranged by Lady Madeline herself. I feigned weakness, innocence, terror, and severe illness. I made it so that even grandmother, whom I had been poisoning, was bedridden alongside me, unable to rise. Ultimately, grandmother was afraid that the Phoenix girl would take her old life away if I died, so she forced herself to stand up and protect me until this very day. 3 months ago, grandmother went to the countryside to visit relatives, and I did not accompany her. Lady Madeline seized the opportunity to take matters into her own hands, arranging for me to marry the lame, dissolute second son of the Marquis's residence. Father told me that as an illegitimate daughter, marrying into the Marquis's residence was already climbing the social ladder. Lady Madeline claimed she had to sell all her dignity to get the Marchioness to agree. Vivian spoke in a gentle voice, telling me to rest assured and enjoy the future wealth and glory. I pretended to be grateful, my mouth ceaselessly thanking them for the wealthy future and the good life ahead, but as I stood in the corridor, listening to the 3 of them discuss and calculate for Vivian's future, my heart was as cold as ice. The younger sister is now grandmother's favorite. At the palace banquet next month, she will help Vivian ask for a reward to enter the crown estate. Currently, the crown estate only houses the crown princess and the side consort. If Vivian enters, she will surely become one of the 6 consorts. If she births a prince, her future will be limitless. The daughter will definitely remember the teachings of father and mother, to bring glory to the Jiang family. I understood clearly that after enduring for so many years, my opportunity had arrived. Vivian was waiting to cross the Dragon's Gate and enter high society. while I was waiting for one final strike to take her life and replace her. I wanted to climb higher step by step, to grasp power tightly. I wanted to force the Su family, who drove my mother to death, and the Zhang family, who profited from the blood of others, to descend together into the Yellow Springs. Now the wishes of both myself and Vivian have been fulfilled. The next day, I took all the betrothal gifts Lady Madeline had prepared for Vivian and marched openly and legitimately into the Crown estate. Lady Madeline was bedridden and did not come to see me off, which was only natural. Yesterday, I stabbed her in the chest with a hairpin, damaging her vital energy. Added to the potent poison I had prepared in the incense burner, her very foundation was injured, and she could not possibly rise. Once she lay down on that bed, she would never sit up again. In the harem, to appear generous, she had promoted several concubines for father. But some were forced to drink sterilization medicine, while others were controlled by threats to their families' lives. They were forced to become soft knives in her hands, tearing at each other until both sides were wounded. Now that she could not rise, the concubines immediately revolted. Taking revenge by slicing flesh with a blunt knife was exactly the method I used to torture her. It was a slow, prolonged torment, painful to the extreme. Seeing me off, father's face was gloomy, and my younger brother glared at me with resentment. Everyone scowled, there was not even a hint of joy. I immediately asked, "Lord Julian, are you dissatisfied with the Crown estate, or do you have an objection to His Majesty's decree?" Father was startled. He took a deep breath, swallowed his anger, and forced a stiff smile. His eldest son gritted his teeth, glared and cursed. "You petty villain, enjoying your success." I laughed and replied, "You do not even understand hierarchy and order, yet you dream of becoming a high official. I fear you will die without even knowing how it happened." Father raised his hand and slapped Hugo Zhang, causing his cheek to swell up. He admonished him coldly. "Your sister is entering the Crown estate for the future of our entire household." Hugo, who had never been scolded before, bit his lip to suppress his terror. Filled with both fear and hatred, he forced the corners of his mouth into a smile that looked worse than crying. Their unhappiness gave me immense pleasure. Dragging the grand procession of betrothal gifts behind me, I held my head high and walked out of the residence gates. On my first day in the Crown estate, Prince Arthur dared not disobey the imperial decree. He still came to my courtyard, though he arrived very late. I understood clearly that within the Crown estate, he already held a white moonlight in his heart and a pure white snow on his brow. Crown Princess Valerie came from a prestigious literary family, a lineage of important officials. Her appearance was dignified, her conduct exemplary. Possessing the foundational learning of the Grand Tutor, she carried the air of a future mother of the nation. Dignified, solemn, like a bright white moon that the world looked up to. The other was the prince's biological cousin, side consort Serafina. She came from the Empress Dowager's maternal family and was a childhood sweetheart who grew up with the prince. When the Empress passed away and the prince lost power, she risked her life many times to save him. She even took an arrow meant for him when the rival prince attacked. The debt of gratitude was heavy, it went without saying. The two of them vied for supremacy, matched in strength and talent. How could they easily tolerate a third person? And my position was not merely that of a third wheel. The prince loathed the daughters of the Zhang clan for their blatant ambition. However, his harem was still sparse, and Lady Madeline had a sister, consort Camilla, who was currently favored by the emperor. The prince had to close his eyes and cooperate, one side needing favor, the other relying on power. The marriage of the Zhang daughter was merely a rope to bind the alliance tight. Whether it was me or Vivian, it truly made no difference. Prince Arthur pushed the door open and stepped in. A cold draft rushed in, causing the oil lamp to flicker unsteadily. I suddenly looked up, and our gazes met. He had sword-like brows and starry eyes, exuding authority without anger. Though young, he already possessed the faint air of an emperor. He sat upright to one side, leisurely twisting the jade ring on his thumb. His gaze fell upon me, scrutinizing, evaluating, and seemingly warning me all at once. I had to play the role of a bondless vine, clinging to his tree of power to climb upward. Therefore, I proactively offered up my weakness in exchange for long-term trust. Meeting those eyes as cold as a frozen lake, I slowly began to disrobe, shedding layer after layer of magnificent clothing. Even when a clear look of disgust rose in his eyes, I decisively removed the final undergarment. His face darkened, and just as he was about to speak, I turned around to reveal a back covered in scars. Marks that could only accumulate over years of torture. Prince Arthur lifted his eyelids slightly to look at me. What is your point? I raised my head and spoke every word clearly. Vivian died suddenly last night. Father regretted losing the high connection to the crown estate, and my stepmother could not bear to waste years of scheming, so they sent me as a substitute. I beg your highness to punish me. The red wedding candle flickered, then popped with a crackling sound. The prince leaned back in the armchair, looking at me indifferently. Then, why did you not play the part to the end? His voice revealed no joy or anger, but he had not yet left. It was obvious he had been deceived by those smooth-talking minor officials and was suppressing a lump of anger. I immediately put my acting skills to use, shrinking closer to him. Your highness is wise and martial, you see through everything. How would someone of humble status like myself dare to conceal anything? Besides, before I could finish, the panicked voice of an old servant rang out from outside. Your highness, it is terrible. Consort Seraphine has severe abdominal pain. The prince did not hesitate for a moment. He immediately turned to leave, but as his hand touched the door, he froze and looked back at me. I flashed a perfectly deceitful smile. Your highness, please go. There is no need for everything. He paused, sighed softly, and his lips moved. Finally, he simply replied with a curt, and turned to leave for good. I leaned back and burst into laughter, then sat up straight and blew out the red candle. Today, everything had gone exactly according to plan. Consort Seraphina's preemptive strike was merely the opening act. She loved Prince Arthur to the bone. She even regarded Valerie as a thorn in her side, let alone me, a daughter of a fourth-rank official who entered the palace solely for glory. The next day, I went to pay my respects to the crown princess and was, as expected, intercepted by Consort Seraphina in the corridor. She was a side consort with her name recorded in the royal genealogy. If she used the excuse that my greeting was improper to scold a lowly concubine like me, no one would dare say a word. But she was accustomed to being reckless and arrogant. Right in front of everyone, she slapped me across the face, causing me to suffer a great humiliation on my second day in the crown estate and become the laughingstock of the entire harem. Afterward, the crown princess sat primly in the main seat and gave me a generous meeting gift, as if to console me. However, she did not mention a single word about the handprint clearly visible on my face. It was not until Consort Seraphina timed the prince's return perfectly and found an excuse to leave that the crown princess finally lifted her phoenix eyes. Her gaze, arrogant as if looking down from the clouds, fell upon my face. You are not Vivian. That single sentence made me immediately drop to my knees with a thud. My face filled with panic as I begged the crown princess for forgiveness. She tapped lightly on her teacup, her eyes filled with disdain and certainty. It was exactly like the look my stepmother gave me when I first entered the Jiang residence. Hateful yet forced to appear generous. She let me kneel until my legs went numb before slowly placing the lid back on the cup. Be obedient and sensible, and I will not make things difficult for you. I understood. She was a noble daughter, the future mother of the nation. She could not dirty her hands. So she needed a sharp, legitimate knife to stab Seraphina, the one who dared to stand as her equal in the crown estate. I had no roots and no backing. My life was in her hands, making me the perfect tool. How could side consort Seraphina's abdominal pain be so coincidental as to flare up exactly on the day I came to pay respects? And how did the crown princess's headache happen, just in time to leave me standing in the corridor to receive that slap? It was Valerie who intentionally pushed me into conflict with Seraphina. But since I was 6 years old, I swore I would never let anyone use me to bully others in this life. She had plotted against me, so she was also my enemy. Still, I pretended to be grateful, knocking my head on the floor with heavy thuds before offering a scented pouch I had embroidered myself to show my gratitude. On it, I had used gold and silver threads to stitch 4 words, smooth sailing, as you wish. The crown princess did not even glance at it, merely ordering an old servant to store it away. Stepping out of the courtyard, the corners of my lips curled up slightly. So that was all there was to it. My only loyal old servant looked at me with eyes full of worry. Wolves surround us on all sides. My lady, how do you plan to survive? In the plum garden, bright calming lanterns were being released one by one. It was the prince and Seraphina praying. Seraphina was pregnant with the prince's first child. He treated it like a treasure, guarding it strictly. That was why, when she had a stomachache last night, he immediately abandoned his alliance with consort Camilla and left. The words, peace and safety, on the lantern shone blindly bright. Before, the crown estate only had Valerie. If anything happened to Serafina's child, Valerie would find it hard to deny responsibility. Now, with me added as a convenient, foolish knife to be thrown out, if the child could not be kept, Valerie could retreat cleanly. My lips curved into a cold sneer. This is only the opening act. You want to drag me into the game. We have yet to see who is truly being led by the nose. Half a month later, a banquet was held in the palace. Lady Madeline's younger sister, now consort Camilla, who was currently favored, pulled me to the Guangzhou palace to sit. As soon as I stepped in, she slapped me to the ground, her gold-plated fingernail guard pointing straight between my eyebrows. She gritted her teeth. Well done, Lena, you even dare to calculate against my Su family. I will not kill you, but I will ensure you do not have a single day of peace. A bowl of dark, thick medicine was brought over by an old servant. Just as she was about to pour it into my mouth, I knocked it away. I grabbed a sharp shard of porcelain in my hand and, with one stroke, slit the old servant's throat. Blood sprayed out. She clutched her neck, struggling and convulsing until she died right before consort Camilla's eyes. Her beautiful face turned pale instantly. Just as she was about to call for help, I shouted, "You have not been pregnant for many years. Do you not want to know why?" The words stuck in consort Camilla's throat. Amidst her terrified and panicked gaze, I removed the gold-plated flower bracelet, a relic left by her mother, and ignored her screams as I smashed it heavily onto the ground with a teacup. She rushed forward to retrieve the keepsake, only to freeze before the thick layer of medicinal powder hidden inside. "This is it," I replied calmly. "This is the ending your sister, who has been close to you since childhood, prepared for you. Lady Madeline had arranged this long ago to ensure you would wholeheartedly scheme for her daughter." Consort Camilla staggered back a step, her voice trembling. She is the most virtuous and generous person. How could she do such a thing? Even if I gave birth to a prince, would I not plan for her and the maternal family? I laughed. Do you truly not know how she killed my mother to steal my father? Do you think a person like that has any sincerity? Consort Camilla collapsed into the armchair, her eyes dry as a withered well fixed on the servant's corpse. After a long while, she snapped out of it. The wet nurse forced me to wear this bracelet at all times. It must have been my sister's idea. I sighed softly, watching the rootless insects flying in the courtyard, and spoke slowly. If she had not been so certain you would help her daughter seize the position of mistress of the crown estate, I might not have suspected. But every month she entered the palace to visit you. She stopped by the Su residence first, and every time, a famous gynecologist from the east side of the city would enter the backyard. Seeing consort Camilla shocked, I said coldly, "I secretly followed him." Holding a knife to that female doctor's neck revealed the truth. What she gave you every month was a pill that is colorless and odorless. It helps maintain eternal youth but renders one permanently infertile. Relying on beauty to fight for favor, yet bound as her pawn for life. What a brilliant method. Consort Camilla stayed silent for a long time, then laughed coldly. If that is so, then my mother's sudden death while discussing my marriage, which delayed the engagement for 3 years and forced me to enter the palace to seek a future, was likely no accident either, was it? Her eyes were ice, cold as they fell upon my face. If so, you and I share a common enemy, consider us tied by the same rope. I looked up, making no effort to hide the ambition and desire in my gaze. Help me, and I will help you get what you want. The servant in consort Camilla's palace was executed for offending the prince's concubine and dragged to the mass grave. I left behind a prescription to help consort Camilla achieve her wish soon. Leaving the palace, Prince Arthur's gaze lingered on my swollen red cheek for a moment. He glanced over indifferently and asked no further questions. It was not until we returned to the crown estate, seeing me hesitate as if wanting to speak, that he stopped and looked at me. "You are not foolish enough to reveal your identity before consort Camilla, are you?" I shook my head in panic, my pale face making the red handprint look even more pitiful. I did not. I only accidentally mentioned that the dazzling dress the princess of the rebel prince gave to the noble consort stole his majesty's favor, which was truly upsetting. I touched my cheek lightly, bowing my head in shame to act sufficiently pitiful, then suddenly looked up, unable to hide a trace of joy. But it does not matter. Consort Camilla asked me to pass a message to your highness. Under the tea hill of the rebel prince's maternal family, there is a surprise gift for you. She said the lips die when the teeth are cold, and she hopes your highness pays attention. The prince's breath hitched, and joy erupted in his eyes. He forgot his appointment with Serafina and immediately rushed out of the estate. Under that tea hill lay the rebel prince's private cache of weapons. The Sue family had investigated this news long ago but kept it tight, intending to use it to help Vivian fight for favor. Now, it had fallen squarely into my hands. What a hypocrite. Sensing someone behind me, the corners of my lips curled up. Here she comes again. Then I pretended to rush forward recklessly. Clang. The sound was crisp. The jade bracelet on Serafina's wrist fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. Slap. A hand struck my face. Her exquisite face was filled with malice and venom. You dare drop the reward bestowed by the Empress Dowager. Guards. Concubine Zhang has no respect and dared to offend her superiors. Seeing Valerie's servant standing by with arms crossed watching the show, I, the pretender of weakness, hurriedly trembled and begged. Side consort, please spare my life. I was merely careless. If there is to be punishment, it must be decided by the crown princess. You are bypassing her to use private torture on me. Do you have no regard for the crown princess and the rules of the crown estate? Slap. I received another blow, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. Serafina roared in anger. You have only been in the crown estate for a few days, yet you dare rely on others to ride over my head. If not for her father repeatedly expressing admiration before his majesty, how could she have secured the position of crown princess? So what if I beat you? Valerie stole my position as the rightful wife. You are merely the daughter of a fourth-rank official, yet you dare sit on my head and act tyrannically, she continued. Even if the crown princess dared to touch me, would she dare touch the imperial hair in my belly? Hold her down and beat her for me. 3 feet of snow lay cold to the bone. While I cried and begged for mercy, I laughed coldly in my heart, counting the beats. 1, 2, stop. As expected, the savior arrived. How could my secret meeting with the prince in the corridor escape the crown princess's eyes and ears? She immediately had someone send word to Serafina, wanting to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight to reap the benefits. I had seen that trick on my stepmother long ago, so I dragged her into the mud to let her be torn apart by the tigers. Valerie appeared, putting on the airs of the rightful wife to suppress others. The harem of the crown estate shouting and killing. What will people think if this gets out? But Serafina showed no respect. She stroked her slightly bulging belly, her voice cold and mocking. The crown princess has a reputation for virtue, so naturally she does not casually beat or scold anyone. But this blind thing dared to disturb His Majesty's eldest grandson and broke the item bestowed by the Empress Dowager. Using your status to pressure me is useless. This bracelet was given by the Empress Dowager. The crown princess is full of principles, so go speak clearly before the Empress Dowager. Valerie tried to remain calm, but the corners of her mouth stiffened. I hurriedly cried and begged. I unintentionally committed a fault. I beg the crown princess to investigate clearly. Valerie glanced at me indifferently and spoke slowly. After all, she was sent by Father Emperor. This remark used the emperor to pressure the Empress Dowager's niece. Serafina's face changed. She was about to explode when her servant pulled her arm. Her eyes flashed as if she suddenly remembered there was a favored concubine in the palace. Even if that person accomplished nothing, a few whispers were enough to disadvantage the prince. Serafina truly loved Arthur. Naturally, she could not let him court disaster. She gritted her teeth. Since she was sent by His Majesty, she certainly cannot die here and trouble my cousin. The death penalty is waived, but living punishment is hard to escape. Kneel in the snow for 2 hours. At this, Valerie lowered her eyes gently, saying nothing, which meant tacit approval. I knelt on the cold snow, red plum blossoms falling sporadically at my feet, resembling blood dripping from my heart. The two of them forced smiles and turned to leave together, but their eyes were choked with hatred. I lowered my head to hide the cold smile on my lips, thinking what is the fun in hiding and fighting? Openly tearing each other apart is worth watching. You want to use me. But who is the sheep waiting to be slaughtered here? When the prince returned to the crown estate in high spirits after obtaining the secret he wanted, I had just finished kneeling for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. Just as he heard the news and ran over, I collapsed into the snow at the perfect moment. My bright red cloak spread across the cold white snow, beautiful yet desolate, making him shudder. Feelings of fake exploitation is real. The prince panicked, immediately lifting me from the snow and holding me tight, running step by step back to my courtyard. A bowl of ginger soup was poured down my throat. I slowly opened my eyes, as if in a dream or illusion, speaking as if drunk. I raised my pale hand and, under the prince's intense gaze, smiled and touched his face. My cheeks were flushed with embarrassment as I mumbled like I was sleepwalking. Did you know? I have married you. The crown princess is dignified, the side consort is beautiful, and I am just a grain of sand falling into the vast ocean, unable to cause a ripple. You will never remember there was someone like me. The candlelight flickered, reflecting a tear at the corner of my eye, clear and pitiful. Fortunately, Rosalie appeared in my dream. The prince's dark eyes trembled slightly, his voice sounding cold like spring water hitting a stone. You dreamed of me. The smile on my face slowly stiffened bit by bit. Right then, I immediately displayed just enough panic, surprise, and confusion. When I tried to pull my hand back, the prince held it tight. Answer me. When did you meet me? I looked up at him blankly, my throat choked with bitterness. You indeed do not remember me. Then, as if comforting myself, I spoke softly. That year, your highness was struck by an arrow while hiding in a dark alley. You may not have seen my face clearly. It was just that I, with a single fleeting glance, was bewildered by your martial demeanor and jade-like appearance. That is why I dared to risk danger and run in the opposite direction to lure the enemy away. My gaze fell on the piece of jade at his waist, and I smiled bitterly. That day, you were wearing this piece of jade. Unfortunately, the jade remains, but the person is no longer the same. The prince seemed to ignore my existence, but the coldness on his face began to crack bit by bit. His hand trembled as he held mine, his eyes darkening as he choked out every word. What were you wearing that day? What color cloak was I wearing? He was clearly testing me. I pretended to be hurt and slowly withdrew my hand from his. That day, I had just returned from the Hugo Temple with my grandmother, wearing light-colored coarse clothes. That is all. Why must your highness demean me with such probing words? That day, your highness was surrounded and attacked from all sides. Your dark blue outfit was covered in blood, slashed all over the body. Even from a distance, I could see clearly there was no cloak. The prince's mask completely crumbled. It really was you. Why did you not tell me when you entered the crown estate? He remembered. That day, before I could open my mouth, he was called away by Serafina's people. Afterward, when I was slapped by the side consort, he turned a blind eye. When I was made to stand in the sun by the crown princess, he stood by coldly watching. Even when consort Camilla made things difficult for me in the palace, he ignored it. He assumed I was ambitious and climbing the social ladder, deserving of what I got. But now, it was all a debt he could not repay. He held me tightly in his arms, full of remorse. Leaving only one sentence. It is my fault. I snuggled into his chest, tears falling one after another from grievance, but only in the shadows where he could not see. The smiling hypocrite, had deceived him. I never saved him. The little girl who saved him back then died under a cliff outside the city, while being hunted by the crown princess. When consort Camilla's people found her, only a desolate, cold skeleton remained. Now that I have borrowed her identity, I will naturally avenge her and clear her hatred. Arthur intended to stay the night in my courtyard, but I refused him. Side consort Serafina is sincere toward your highness. Today she got angry because of a misunderstanding. For the sake of your child and for the Empress Dowager's peace of mind, it would be better if you went to her courtyard tonight. The prince's brow relaxed, and he replied with satisfaction. Serafina has a hot temper but not a bad heart. She is pregnant and easily emotional. Do not hold it against her. The man who just promised to protect me, keep me fed and warm to repay the life-saving grace, turned around and advised me to endure, to swallow the bitterness alone. Fortunately, I never truly saved him. I lowered my eyes to hide the mockery and replied gently. The side consort is genuine. I understand. Pleased with my humility, the prince left behind mountains of gold and silver as rewards and went straight to Serafina's courtyard. He stayed long enough, and the rewards were unusually abundant. In the eyes of the harem, I was the newly favored one. As a villain enjoying success, I naturally did not hide it. I wore gold and jade, my wrists faintly red, kneeling gracefully before the crown princess. This murder weapon was now pressed against her neck. Her expression remained unchanged, but her hand holding the teacup was no longer as steady as before. I apologized softly. I fainted in the snow last night and did not know His Highness would come to my courtyard. I am truly sorry. What are you saying? The crown princess cut me off, signaling the old servant to help me up. She smiled softly. Serving His Highness is your duty. As the crown princess, I bear the responsibility of spreading branches and leaves for the crown estate. If there is good news in the future, I will be even happier. She awarded me 200-year-old ginseng roots to nourish my body. I breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly gave thanks. She took a sip of tea and spoke slowly, as if unintentionally. Although this tea is good, it cannot compare to the snow tea made from plum blossoms that His Highness prefers. It snowed heavily today, and the snow in the plum garden is very thick. I understood and immediately went to the plum garden to collect snow from the plum petals. Later that afternoon, passing by the plum garden, the prince saw me with a red-nosed tip collecting snow to make tea for him. He was deeply moved and held my hand as we returned to the courtyard. Everything happened just as Valerie expected. Serafina brought handmade snacks and sat until late at night, only to hear the news that the prince was staying the night in my courtyard. She used the old trick again, ordering her servant to use fetal movement as an excuse to barge into my courtyard and steal him. I pretended to be generous and pushed the prince, who was covered in my lipstick, away. The prince, whose mood was high, was interrupted and immediately summoned the imperial physician. When the physician declared the fetus was fine, he immediately ordered that servant to be beaten. From then on, Serafina and I officially became enemies. Serafina hated that she could not eliminate me immediately. She used every excuse to accuse me, but was stopped by the crown princess. She accused me of harming the imperial hair, but the prince brought out evidence to save me. She sent people to poison me, but ended up killing her own spies planted in my courtyard. Even when Arthur took me out of the palace to pray for blessings, she sent assassins. I only needed to hide in the prince's arms in panic, and he took an arrow for me. Every single time, Arthur knew, but he still coaxed me. I cannot leave the Empress Dowager's support. Elena, do not hold a grudge against her. I will make it up to you later. I pretended to agree, playing the role of the person who pleased him. But inside, I laughed coldly. I only need the present. If you cannot protect me right now, if you fail me, you will never gain my trust or softness again. Serafina's madness only drove Arthur further and further away. Drowning in failure, she lost her reason. Finally, while I was alone watching the snow by the lake, she quietly approached from behind. "Guess what? If you drown today, would His Highness..." Before she could finish, she slipped and fell straight into the freezing lake. Her cumbersome fur cloak became heavy as stone when wet, dragging her straight to the bottom. Seeing the prince running toward me, I curved my lips and jumped into the lake with a splash. I became her straw of hope. She desperately grabbed me, stepping on me to struggle, but her heavy dress prevented her escape. I held my breath and moved to help her take off the coat. She hated me and blamed me, yet my act of saving her was like an execution. She struggled violently, wrestling with me in the water, until she was exhausted and let me remove the fur coat and push her to the surface. The lake water rippled, and I saw the prince's extremely worried gaze. Even though I knew how to swim, I was frozen nearly to the point of paralysis. As the maids pulled Serafina up, I slowly sank to the bottom of the lake under the prince's horrified gaze. When I opened my eyes, it was 3 days later. I was unconscious for 3 days and nights due to a high fever. Serafina's child gone, she cried and demanded death, wanting me to pay with my life. But the prince had witnessed me risking my life to save her, so he insisted on asking for the full story. I grabbed the scented pouch at his waist and suddenly asked, "Why is my childhood nickname embroidered on this?" The prince froze. That pouch was originally a gift I gave to the crown princess. She had put tonic medicine in it and hung it on the prince's waist, intentionally adding my name to drive Serafina crazy with anger. The jade piece originally worn by the prince was something Serafina had personally prayed for. But coincidentally, on the night the prince visited my courtyard, that item disappeared. Bit by bit, every event was a knife stabbing straight into Serafina's heart. But clearly, invisible hands were pushing both her and me into a bottomless pit. It was obvious who wanted to use my favor as a shield. Everyone knew I often sat by the lake, yet on that very day, thin ice appeared unexpectedly, causing Serafina to slip. 1 arrow, 2 targets. It was clear who did it. Arthur understood too. One was his life-saving benefactor, the other was the love of his life. He should have forced out the truth. However, he only lowered his eyes, held my hand tightly, and said, "The crown princess is pregnant. It is the legitimate child of the crown estate. The grand tutor and father emperor are extremely happy. There is no need to mention this matter again, it was just an accident." So Valerie had planned a retreat long ago. My painstaking calculations ended in vain, without hurting her in the slightest. Fortunately, my high fever was caused by medicine I took myself, and the child in Serafina's belly was lost because I pulled her skirt, causing her belly to repeatedly hit the sharp rocks. I avenged the times she harmed me, so I did not lose out. I have said it before, I am a pretender, fake cruelty, fake innocence, fake weakness, fake obedience, fake incompetence, until I suddenly draw a knife and see blood. You want me to take the blow while both sides are wounded so someone else can sit back and profit. There is no such easy thing in this world. That night, the prince punished all the servants in the crown princess's courtyard. I took the scented pouch I had embroidered with my own hands and placed it before Serafina. The stitching and thread were clearly different from the pouch hanging at the prince's waist. No matter how foolish she was, by this point she had to understand that this was all Valerie's conspiracy. Relying on her cousin's favor, Serafina disregarded her body, which had just suffered a miscarriage, and stormed straight to the crown princess's courtyard to cause a scene. Just at that moment, the crown princess pretended to have disturbed fetal energy, and immediately ordered Serafina to be confined. At that time, the prince desperately needed support from the Grand Tutor's estate, so he had to coax and deceive Serafina while using jewels and jade to appease her. Unable to demand justice, and hearing that the crown princess was suffering from severe morning sickness, Serafina watched as the prince sent the pregnancy, calming medicine bestowed upon her by the Empress Dowager to Valerie instead. Her eyes turned red with hatred, and she even drew a dagger and stabbed it straight into the prince's chest. Although the prince tried to cover it up, the news still leaked into the palace, causing Serafina to be reprimanded and confined. She believed the crown princess had framed her, so her hatred for Valerie seeped into her bones. In truth, I had already passed the information to consort Camilla, unintentionally letting her slip it out before the emperor. One must strike precisely to ruin a family. Every slap that fell on my face was not in vain. As for me, I have never collaborated with others to bully myself. The crown princess leaned back on her bed, looking listlessly at the pile of rewards sent from the palace, and spoke to me calmly. You are very smart, but for a smart person, one wrong step is fatal. She was suspecting me. I immediately knelt upright on the floor and spread out my own prescription for tonic medicine. An old midwife specialized in nursing her came forward to inspect it. The midwife whispered a few sentences into her ear, and the suspicious look on the crown princess's face turned into a soft smile. So that is how it is. I misjudged you. She pushed a pair of silver bracelets, which had been buried with my mother in her grave, in front of me. I know you are a loyal and honest person. These bracelets are a reward for you. I stood up slowly, biting back the hatred that she had not only killed my mother, but also dug up her grave to steal her belongings. I put away the contraceptive prescription I had shown her. I spent 10 years eliminating my stepmother, wanting to become the person beneath one, but above 10,000. I will pluck out every thorn in my flesh. Even if it takes another 10 years, I do not mind. From then on, the crown princess rested peacefully to nurture her pregnancy. The prince and the rebel prince fought fiercely. Serafina was under house arrest, crying in resentment within her courtyard. As for me, I sat calmly in my courtyard every day, copying scriptures stroke by stroke to pray for the crown princess and her child. Each scroll of scriptures was delivered to Valerie. She would merely glance at them and casually toss them onto her headboard. In just 8 short months, they filled half the cabinet. Each stroke of the brush contained my true feelings. Early the following autumn, the crown princess suddenly went into labor. It was clear that all her food had been monitored and her body closely watched by imperial physicians. Yet she still had a difficult birth. She suffered through the night, surviving 9 parts death to 1 part life. Finally, she gave birth to the eldest daughter of the crown estate, but because of excessive blood loss, her body was damaged, and she could never conceive again. When Valerie heard the terrible news, she nearly fainted. I comforted her gently. The days ahead are long. Recovering your health is what matters. Even though she is a princess, she is still the firstborn of the crown estate. She looked at me silently, then looked away, whispering, "Yes, the days ahead are long." I walked out of the delivery room, which reeked of blood, my gaze lightly sweeping over the scrolls of scriptures. Every character was stained with medicine, every stroke and line hid the malice in my heart. Even if the best physician in the world were invited, they would find no clues, because the medicine guide lay right in the scented pouch worn on the prince's body. Every stitch and thread had been soaked in the drug. She wanted to use a scented pouch to push me to my death. I had 2 identical ones. I simply needed to swap the pouch with my name onto the prince's waist, letting him wear it every day as a catalyst, while staying by the crown princess's side. That was my plot. Who would have known that from the day I entered the crown estate, I had already carved a talisman of death for her? I bet that the crown princess was just like my hypocritical stepmother years ago. Fortunately, I won the bet. The crown estate had just welcomed its eldest daughter when the rebel prince was accused of hiding weapons and plotting treason. After the Grand Tutor remonstrated 4 times, his property was confiscated and he was exiled. The crown estate could be said to have double happiness at its door. The forces that had been hesitating and observing could no longer wait, nor did they fear the Grand Tutor anymore. They successively sent people into the crown estate. In just 1 short year, the crown estate added 8 new women. They had illustrious family backgrounds and outstanding beauty, all were top selections. Among them, Lady Shen from the ducal house was exquisitely beautiful and had a noble temperament, greatly favored by the prince. Having entered the palace for only 3 months, she already had good news. The crown princess was restless. Finally, her gaze fell upon me, who was sewing clothes for her eldest daughter. "Elena, you have been in the crown estate for over a year. You should stop the contraceptive soup, should you not?" Borrowing a belly to bear a child, she had set her sights on me, because for the past year, I had been like an abandoned child of the Zhang family. Even when I fell into the lake and was in a coma for 3 days and nights, no one from the Zhang residence asked a single question. A person like me was extremely easy for her to kill. I knelt down to thank the crown princess for her grace, but the corners of my lips could not hide a mocking smile. It is not yet known whose hand the deer will die in. Not long after, Lady Shen of the ducal house suffered a miscarriage due to poison after a conflict with another concubine, losing a fully formed male fetus. 2 lives were lost in 1 body. The crown princess sat high and mighty, pretending to be uninvolved. Watching 2 beautiful young women die, she was unmoved. She looked up and spoke to me, who had just been reported pregnant. "Try hard. If you give birth to His Highness's eldest son, you can secure glory for a lifetime." I understood. The crown princess had calculated carefully and valued the fetus in my belly. I pretended not to understand her ambition, shedding tears of emotion. Then, using the excuse of missing my grandmother, I asked to visit the Zhang residence. If I did not act like a petty villain gloating with success and showing off my power now, then when would I? The crown princess despised my triumphant look, never knowing that I took this opportunity to reveal the truth about Lady Shen's death to the ducal house. I had no mountain to lean on, but I could find one. Upon returning to the residence, I learned that Lady Madeline had been so oppressed by the concubines that she vomited blood in anger. Now, she barely maintained her dignity and no longer possessed the arrogance of the past. The roles had reversed. I was the one on high. I rubbed my belly and asked her, "I am standing right here. Do you not intend to avenge your daughter?" The blade in her hand was a span away from my chest when it was grabbed tightly by my beloved father. Madeline Sue lost her chance for revenge once again and angrily stabbed my father in the arm. What a pity, it was far from his heart. I was truly disappointed. Blood dripped onto the toe of my pearl-encrusted shoe. I laughed softly. Seeing blood is a bad omen. "My lord, do you intend to harm the dragon and phoenix bloodline of the prince?" Madeline Sue choked with rage. Before she could curse, my father slapped her, flipping her over. "You madwoman. You dare offend the imperial hair. All the heads of the Zhang family are buried with it." Madeline Sue froze, grabbed his sleeve, and wailed. "It was that lowly wench who killed Vivian. Why did you not let me kill her? Vivian is dead, she cannot even enter the ancestral tomb. On what basis does she get to wear brocade and step onto the high clouds? I want her dead. I want her to pay with her life for my daughter." Slap. Father dealt her another heavy blow to the face. Though pained, he gritted his teeth and shouted, "Drag this madwoman to the backyard. Without an order, she is not allowed to take a half step out." That backyard was a place so filthy that the concubines could slice her to death, cut by cut. No matter how powerful the Sue family was, they could not be bigger than the crown estate, nor could they interfere in the Zhang family's domestic affairs. Thus, I left the residence, satisfied with my father's careful, fawning smile and the eyes of the concubines, silently implying they would avenge their children. Valerie fed me and kept me warm, raising the child in my belly day by day. At 8 months, my belly was as large as if I were about to give birth. But now, the prince was criticized for forming factions, causing the emperor to detest him. Rumors spread everywhere that the emperor was still physically strong and had the intention of deposing the prince to set up another. Arthur was in turmoil, and his expectations for the child in my belly gradually cooled. But this child was my only hope. Naturally, I had to calculate to the very end. Just as consort Camilla's 7th princess turned 1 month old, I used the excuse of visiting to enter the palace. Consort Camilla had now been promoted to concubine Shu. Seeing me, she was visibly happy, but when her gaze fell on my belly, she immediately panicked. I held her hand tightly, looking straight into her eyes. "Help me give birth to this child." That night coincided with the late empress's birthday. The emperor was at the Weiyang Palace, remembering his true love from his youth, while I suddenly went into labor in the remote Guangzhou Palace. Fortunately, the people in consort Camilla's palace acted quickly. Before long, imperial physicians and midwives crowded half the room. The child, whom others had secretly raised with medicine intending to force me into a difficult birth and death by hemorrhage, was now being born. I risked my life to give birth prematurely at 8 months. I still suffered extreme difficulty, screaming in pain and even crying out for my husband to save me. The emperor stood in the courtyard, looking up at the moon, remembering the late empress. Years ago, she had suffered just as much giving birth to the prince. Back then, he held her hand and swore to love her for a lifetime, treating her as his life. But later, the Prince of Q became the crown prince. Women were sent into the crown estate one after another. Amidst the waves of gentle flattery, he gradually forgot his wife from years ago and his oath to heaven and earth. Only on the night I gave birth did he, in his drunken state, recall his deceased wife and the son he once loved dearly. The prince paced back and forth anxiously, his eyes full of unease, his brow furrowed tight, just like his father years ago. The emperor's anger subsided by 80%. For the first time he revealed rare fatherly affection in the imperial family. "The imperial physicians are here. She will be fine." The prince was stunned. The midwife shouted with joy, "Congratulations, your highness. It is a little prince." The emperor nodded continuously in joy. He patted the prince's shoulder, acting as both father and sovereign, and said, "You are a father now. You must be more mature. From now on, do less of the things that invite criticism and harm your descendants." These words gently erased the matter of the prince using marriage to rope in court officials. The eldest son of the crown estate was born on the late empress's birthday. People said it was a good omen sent by heaven, helping the prince pass his tribulation. The prince understood clearly that I did nothing without a purpose. I deliberately chose today to take labor-inducing medicine under his father's eyelids, using the child to turn the tide for him. His eyes red, he held my hand tight, his voice choked. "You have suffered." I shook my head weakly. "For you, I can do anything." Once again, I was held tightly in his arms. Amidst the rapid heartbeat, only an endless silence remained. I am truly a pretender of cruelty. Choosing to use premature birth medicine in the palace was my plan from the day I knew I was pregnant. Valerie wanted me to die from a difficult birth. How could I let that happen? The ducal house acted unexpectedly, and the prince was caught off guard, but my taking the opportunity to strike was all within calculation. By choosing to give birth on that day in the palace, I kept my life and borrowed the late empress's birthday, to make my child the most special one in the palace. The prince loved the child, the emperor protected him, and the court officials praised him. The infant brought good omens. Finally, I was promoted to side consort, my name recorded in the royal genealogy. The prince felt both guilt and gratitude. My child was allowed to be raised by my side. The crown princess had to swallow the bitterness. She finally understood that I was the knife that turned back to stab straight into her heart. She hated me to the bone, so she could no longer hide it and intentionally invited the Zhang family to visit me. Hugo, my younger brother, pointed at my face and cursed. "Elena, your dog is relying on power. You are the thief who stole my sister's brilliant future, a shameless robber." He rushed forward, rude and insolent, forcing me back step by step, my face turning pale. Just at that moment, the crown princess led the prince to appear coincidentally. She smiled, waiting for my reputation to be ruined. But at that exact moment, I feigned terror and fell from the corridor, fainting unconscious. The crown princess pretended to be horrified, borrowing Hugo's words to accuse me of deceiving the sovereign and offending superiors, wanting to kill me in front of the prince. She was still elegant and stunning, her eyes sure of victory, but she did not know she was already the loser in my hands. Plotting for Serafina and me to slaughter each other was vicious. Intentionally raising my child to force me into death by difficult birth was cruel. Now, wanting to ruin my reputation and steal my child and power as soon as I gave birth was the ambition of a wolf. Arthur knew everything but had never exposed it. Until today, the grace of saving his life had not yet faded, and I was smashed in the face by her trap. The prince's eyes were filled with disgust and regret. After a long time, he spoke coldly. The day she entered the crown estate, I already knew. But so what? She once saved me, and I am willing to protect her. You took it upon yourself to invite the Zhang family to put on a play. What exactly is your plot? Do you think I do not see through it? You consider yourself virtuous and capable. Surely you would not do something to turn me and Father Emperor against each other. You are not that stupid. The crown princess slumped into the armchair, her face pale. She could not say she had harmed the prince's savior, nor did she dare report my deception to the emperor, lest she cause the prince and his father to turn against each other. The crown estate would be destroyed, so she could only grit her teeth and endure, swallowing the humiliation of being detested. Hugo, the arrogant braggart who had been protected too well, was coldly thrown into the lake by the prince. I watched my good brother bobbing in the water, my heart immensely satisfied. From now on, he should understand that he is not worthy to touch even the hem of my skirt. Hugo was fished out when he was barely breathing and thrown back to the Jiang residence half dead. I heard that after receiving the news, Madeleine Sue vomited blood and fainted. Then, mouthed by the concubines in front of my father, she earned the reputation of failing to teach her son properly, and was expelled to a separate villa to reflect. After hearing the good news, I drank a large bowl of tonic soup, 1 arrow, 2 targets. The crown princess finally understood that I, too, knew how to use such schemes. As soon as the prince left, she smashed everything in her room. Her scheme failed, and she fell seriously ill from anger. I seized the moment to push open the door to Serafina's courtyard. I owe you a child. I am paying it back. Will you help me overthrow her? Serafina had cultivated her character for 2 years, but she still knew everything happening in the palace like the back of her hand. To sit firmly on high, the Empress Dowager naturally had to endure what others could not endure and plot what others dared not plot. Serafina asked, "Why should I believe you?" I threw down the Kongming lantern she had once released with the prince in the plum garden. Waiting for her pupils to tremble, I spoke word by word. Because you cannot let go. And because I can help you. She might not believe me, but I did not care. Only when holding my child at night did I pretend to sigh unintentionally to the prince. It turns out the child side consort Serafina lost back then was also a fully formed fetus. If he were still here, Justin would have had an older brother. The rattle in the prince's hand froze in mid-air. He and Serafina had been angry with each other for 2 years, leading to the point where he was no longer angry, but simply forgot. Just like his father years ago, bewitched by the layers of beauty in the harem, we would all become the fallen flowers of yesterday sooner or later. Not long after, on Serafina's birthday, the prince personally carried her favorite Kongming lantern to her courtyard. The girl who used to be unruly and arrogant was now dignified and proper, impossible to fault. The prince was pleased and vaguely disappointed. The naive impulsiveness was gone. How much love remained? He wanted everything. It was truly laughable. After that night, side consort Serafina was favored again. A few months later, she became pregnant and returned to being arrogant and unruly in the crown estate, even finding excuses to provoke Valerie. Valerie naturally turned her spearhead toward Serafina, who was much harder to deal with than me. I needed an ally, so I did my best to help her. In Serafina's medicine, I found agents that would damage the fetus, placed by another pregnant concubine out of jealousy. In the flower pot by her bed, I found blood-activating herbs spilled by a clumsy new maid. Once, her maid even wore her clothes to prey and attracted assassins. Death warriors with a blood feud against the Zhou family. Every time, Serafina escaped by a hair's breadth. Every time, Valerie hid behind the scenes, safe and sound. Fortunately, Serafina's daughter was finally born safely. Valerie breathed a sigh of relief when she turned back to target me again. I had arranged everything tightly, guarding my courtyard like an iron fortress. Not even a fly could fly in. Years passed. The crown estate was never calm, but I protected my child, always keeping myself out of the circle of conflict. 5 years later, the emperor died suddenly. The prince ascended the throne. Valerie stepped up to become the empress of the central palace. Recommended by the Grand Empress Dowager, Serafina was titled noble consort. I did not fight or snatch. Out of consideration that I bore a son, the emperor titled me virtuous consort. The empress mocked me for calculating all my life only to be ridden over. But she could not laugh for long, because the noble consort became pregnant again. Deep in the harem, it could not compare to the crown estate of the past. The influence Serafina once held by relying on her maternal family to wrestle with Valerie had vanished into smoke. The Grand Empress Dowager was forced to move to the imperial temple to rest in her old age. The Zhao family relatives were feared by Arthur, who used excuses to dismiss and exile most of them. Conversely, because the Grand Tutor had students filling the court, and the new top scholar was his man, his power grew stronger, causing difficulties both inside and outside. Noble consort Serafina was exhausted from coping and visibly wasted away. The second princess unfortunately caught a chill and nearly died. Though ruthless, I am still a mother, so I finally intervened, using silver needles to save the princess. I wanted to test if the noble consort was willing to form a lifelong alliance, provided we secured imperial power. Serafina showed no attitude, merely using fatigue as an excuse to send me away. Yet, when my son was pushed into the lake by the first princess, she stood by and watched, not lifting a finger to help. When a witness was needed, she said she stood too far away and saw nothing. Hidden in this deep palace, everyone wants to be the sparrow behind the mantis, waiting to reap the spoils. I hid my hatred in my heart, kneeling without rising, begging Arthur for justice. But he had long forgotten everything from the crown estate, including the so-called life-saving grace of the past. He opened his mouth only to speak of the state and society, of helplessness, of the Grand Tutor exhausting his mind for his daughter. In that moment, in the Empress's eyes, I saw again the condescension of my stepmother years ago, the look of disdain as if crushing an ant. Illustrious family backgrounds and noble origins are the umbrellas protecting people like them. I did not argue. I quietly returned to the Zhongqiu Palace, using illness as an excuse to lock everything down. I had lost my relatives, my most beloved people. Walking the lonely path full of hatred, I became hateful and cruel. Tears fell drop by drop onto my son's small hand. He looked up with his scalded hands, slowly wiped my tears, and forced a smile to comfort me. Mother consort, do not worry. I have grandmother protecting me. I will definitely survive every disaster. Mother must take care of your body. The palace is deep. Only you and I together can rely on each other forever. My child is truly sensible. Just like me years ago. He saw through people's hearts early in this cold world. He is truly wise. Even though he saw clearly the nature of people, he still tried to pretend he did not, playing the role of the innocent, lovely child the emperor liked. Not fighting, not snatching. But even so, the knives of others still fell upon us. Then it is time for me, the vicious woman who knows how to pretend, to turn around and strike, sending them all down to the Yellow Springs. 3 months later, a maid from the Weiyang Palace brought a bowl of ginseng soup to the noble consort, causing Serafina to suddenly die, taking 2 lives with her. Before the maid could be arrested, she smashed her head against a pillar and died. The emperor was horrified. The Grand Empress Dowager immediately returned to the palace. The people of Weiyang Palace knelt filling the courtyard. After each bloodied body was carried out, testimonies pointing directly at the empress were gradually revealed, stacked high before the desk. The empress was caught off guard. She could not understand why the slow-acting poison was poured into a whole bowl by that foolish maid. Nor could she expect why someone struck on that exact day. Coincidentally, at that precise moment, the ducal house presented damning evidence that the Grand Tutor's students were openly buying and selling official titles under his protection. The emperor was furious. He confiscated their property and condemned them, striking like thunder. The Grand Tutor, frail in body, was beaten unconscious with 1 strike. She certainly did not know that the maid who sacrificed her life was the younger sister of the dowry maid who followed the concubine named Cheng. Years ago, it was Valerie's cruelty that caused both mistress and servant to die unjustly on a stormy night. That younger sister was like me, enduring for many years, finally given a chance to strike by my own hand. Serafina was not innocent either. She was clearest about the unjust death of that maid's sister. Yet she ignored it for fear of another lowly servant competing for favor in the crown estate. That was their karma. I merely pushed the boat with the current. When the empress was banished to the desolate wing, I was sitting in my courtyard, teaching my son to read and write, holding Buddhist scriptures in my hand, speaking words of benevolence and morality, looking peaceful and detached from the world. The emperor entered with a tired face, but seeing the peace and gentleness of me and my young child, his chaotic mood was temporarily relaxed in the spreading scent of agarwood. I had added sedatives to it. From then on, Arthur often visited my palace to avoid his troubles. Thus, I, who had no roots or power, was given the authority to manage the 6 palaces of the harem. I am a genuine pretender. I calculated for years just to stand above 10,000 people, yet I always appeared cautious, worrying about every little thing. Even with the Empress locked in the desolate wing, I never made things difficult for her. When she could not bear it and wanted to starve herself to death, I pulled her back from the gates of hell myself, letting her live in a state between life and death. The relatives she killed in the harem would take turns exacting revenge. Until she ran out of her last breath, the emperor was pleased with my thoughtfulness. 2 years later, he titled me noble consort. I pretended to be virtuous, pretended to be generous, pretended to love the emperor, and loved even his children. Not only did I care for each one, but I made no distinction even for the children of Valerie and Serafina. 5 years of dedicated effort finally earned me the reputation of being virtuous and generous, until the Duke led the court officials to petition for my son to be made crown prince. At this moment, I, the pretender, finally stopped pretending. The cosmetics awarded to the concubines were all mixed with aphrodisiacs, combined with the tonic soup I gave Arthur every day. Before long his body was drained dry. During the autumn hunt, when he hunted a red fox for me, he suddenly fell from his horse and fell ill, unable to rise. 5 months later, on his deathbed, he suddenly remembered the years in the crown estate. He held my hand and whispered, "Back then, Valerie was virtuous, Serafina was weak, and you were obedient as a cat. How did everything change so suddenly?" I smiled softly and replied, "But His Majesty was not satisfied back then either, were you? Of the 3 of us, you never sincerely protected anyone." Arthur was stunned. His dry eyes fell on my face, seemingly remembering something, and suddenly asked, "You once said you loved me. Why have you never fought for anything all these years?" Hearing this, I chuckled and slowly bowed my head. Because I love myself more than anyone else, and His Majesty was never worth fighting for. The Emperor's hand trembled. I tucked his hand under the blanket. He struggled to sit up and cried out, "That year, you were willing to risk your life to save we. That year, that person was not me." But I only looked up at the blue sky outside, free of rain or wind, and laughed softly. Do not mention the events of that year again. Servants, serve His Majesty his medicine. A gentle breeze blew through the Emperor's life. As soon as I returned to my palace, news came that the Emperor had passed away. Though my lips could not hide a smile, I am a person who knows how to fake it properly, so I immediately fainted from grief. 3 days later, my son ascended the throne, and I stood by his side as regent. This time, I did not pretend anymore. The first thing I did was borrow the hand of the ducal house to exterminate my maternal clan, the Zhang and Su families. Death by 1,000 cuts was the final gift I left for my father. At the very moment he witnessed everything he had worked so hard to build turn to smoke, when the blood of the children he had high hopes for flowed like a river, when his father-in-law, whom he worshipped, was torn apart by 5 horses. I stood before him and smiled. "When you go down to the Yellow Springs, remember to say sorry to my mother." His pupils contracted, and he screamed tremblingly, "You are a lunatic. For your mother, you dared to fabricate charges of treason and selling out the country, causing me to die without an intact corpse. You really are a lunatic." Of course I am crazy, but ask yourself, can anyone witness their most beloved person die miserably in front of them, and not go crazy? Over 3,000 cuts. I personally supervised and ordered someone to count every single one. Not until his flesh was mashed and only bones remained did I allow a stab to the heart to end his life. I stood up and returned to the palace to bring the good news to Dowager Consort Su. The wind rose in the courtyard again, sending fallen flowers flying 1,000 miles. The feud between her and me was finally washed clean by the blood of the Su and Zhang families. The emperor stood at the palace gate to welcome me. The officials and inner court attendants chanted in unison, "Long live." That was the supreme glory that belonged to me. The world praised me for destroying my own family for the sake of righteousness, for being open and upright. But from beginning to end, I was just a pretender, cruel to the very bone. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.